welcome again to Snow Country Stories Japan. I'm your host, Peter Carnell, a freelance writer and guide based in Nagano, and I hope everyone is doing well as we head towards the middle of yet another year. Can you believe that? It's early summer here in the Snow Country, but despite that, there's still some snow about. I was up in the lower reaches of the North Alps on the weekend doing a little hiking and encountered a good amount of snow on the ground from around 2,000 metres and above. As I always like to say on the podcast, the Snow Country is in truth a place of four seasons, but even in summer, there's always reminders that winter is never far away. On this episode, we venture away from Nagano for the first time and into the more northern prefecture of Yamagata. As discussed in the last episode, the Snow Country, or Yukiguni in Japanese, accounts for a lot of the Japanese landmass and includes entire prefectures such as Yamagata. And that's the direction we head today, for what is also the first remote interview of the podcast. If you're anything like me, when adult responsibility and the more mundane aspects of life start to get to you, you might on occasion think of retreating from the world and seeking a job caring for a lighthouse on a remote and otherwise uninhabited island, becoming a Trappist monk and brewing beer in silence, or leading a hermit's life in a forest or up a mountain to commune with nature. I daydream of living away from the modern world more than I should probably admit, in simplicity and at peace, out there in the wild, among the beasts and part of nature. As youth fades and my middle age takes hold, I find the idea of doing so more and more appealing, and I admire anyone who pulls up stumps on a conventional life and heads toward the forested dark and mountain caves that speak, I think, to an element within all of us that wants solitude, solace, and to be more aligned with the natural world. With that in mind, it is of no surprise that I have an interest and growing admiration for Japan's mysterious Yamabushi. Translating as one who prostrates himself on a mountain, the word Yamabushi refers to mountain ascetics, those who practice various forms of shugendo, in which ritual and practice in natural landscapes, especially mountains, is fundamental. As such, the Yamabushi are synonymous with mountains and forests, in which for more than 1,000 years they have retreated in spiritual testing that has seen them earn a mysterious, almost preternatural reputation thanks to their secretive training, which is said to include feats of endurance while exposed to challenging environments. Listeners to previous episodes of the podcast might by now recognize the word Yamabushi, as talk of them has come up in episode 3, of Tengu and Taiko, an interview with a one-dimensional woman, episode 5, The High Life with Molto the Mountain Guide, and episode 6, Shigekogen Brewery, The Artistry of Barrel-Aged Beers. I fully expect that the Yamabushi will continue to emerge in future conversations, and for that reason, I want to explore more about them and go a little deeper into who they are and what they do in this episode. On today's episode, I speak with Tim Bunting, a practicing Yamabushi based in the Snow Country region of Yamagata. Tim has been practicing as a Yamabushi since 2017, and originally from New Zealand, he is now better known by the moniker the Kiwi Yamabushi. As Tim explains, he is a follower of what is called Haguro Shugendo, a form of Shinto Shugendo practiced on the Dewa Sanzan, 3 sacred mountains in Yamagata. That will all make more sense once Tim has explained it. I asked Tim some questions that can be difficult to answer, and it's important to point out that he is speaking from his knowledge of the form of Shugendo that he practices, and cannot necessarily speak for all Yamabushi and all forms of Shugendo. Tim is also not allowed to discuss all aspects of his practice as a Yamabushi, whom are sworn to secrecy regarding specific rituals, but nevertheless provides a lot of insight into the history and fundamental teachings of Shugendo. In speaking with Tim, we go into a little detail about the importance of nature worship or spending time in nature. In traditional Japanese culture, nature and specific natural features are believed to be repositories of knowledge, which cannot be revealed and understood through written or spoken word. In order to access the teachings, we must spend time in nature. Mountains play an especially important role in this practice, and the way of the Yamabushi involves, if I understand correctly, retreating to the mountains to seek our own death and rebirth, at least in a spiritual sense. I'll leave that for Tim to discuss, given his deep knowledge of such matters. I hope that this episode piques your interest in Japan's unique blending of religions and faith systems, and the centrality of nature worship and especially mountains to the cultural fabric of Japan. It's a topic I intend to revisit again and again on this podcast, one that connects to a personal interest of mine in the relationship of people to landscape in how we interpret and interact with the natural world. Throughout the interview, Tim mentions different Yamabushi training courses that are available in Yamagata, including courses for non-Japanese speakers. If you're interested in those programs, please visit www.yamabushido.jp, and to follow Tim, visit his really fantastic website, www.timbunting.com. Thanks to everyone who is listening to the podcast. If you're enjoying it, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review it. It only takes a second and really helps the podcast apps find it and promote it to others. Now, time to get into it. We go a little deeper in this episode, people. I hope you enjoy. My guest on the podcast today is Tim Bunting, a practicing Yamabushi based in Yamagata, who is otherwise known as the Kiwi Yamabushi. Tim, thanks for speaking with me today, and how are you?
Kia ora, Pete. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So, Tim, you're based in Yamagata. For listeners who aren't familiar with where Yamagata is, could you please describe just where it is in relation to the other areas of the snow country? So, for example, Nagano, Niigata, and in relation to Tokyo.
Sure thing. So, Nagano is, what's that? The Japanese Alps, right? And then north of the Japanese Alps, you've got Niigata Prefecture, and we're touching Niigata Prefecture, so we're north of Niigata Prefecture on the Sea of Japan coast.
Yep, so very much part of the snow country, and in fact, Actually, I recently discovered that Yamagata receives the heaviest average snowfall of any prefecture in Japan. So can I ask, what are winters like there, and how much snow do you typically experience?
Right, so where I am, I'm in Sakata City, which is, so it's on the coast of the Sea of Japan. And I'm about, maybe 5 to 10 kilometers from the ocean. And this is actually a port city. So we get a lot of the ocean, like salty wind and stuff. So the snow, it does settle here, but it doesn't get as bad as inland Yamagata. So for us, I this year I did have to clear the snow a few times, but it wasn't that bad. One of the mountains that I practice on as a Yamabushi is called Gassan. And Gassan has the latest ski season in Japan. It starts in April. Yeah, the ski season starts in April until about July because it gets so much snow. It gets more than 10 meters of snow.
Wow. What's the name of the resort? Gassan?
Gassan, Mount Gassan.
Interesting. I've not heard of it.
Yeah. And there's a caldera on Gassan. It's called Hijiori Onsen. And Hijiori Onsen is famous for the deepest snow in Japan, or at least that's what I've heard. I'm not sure if it's true or not. That's what they tell me.
Are you a skier or snowboarder yourself?
Snowboard. Yeah, so I started snowboarding when I first came here in 2010. Loved it. I still love it. Yeah, it's great.
So mountains are quite close to where you are.
Yeah, Japan is a country of mountains, right? There's a list of 100 famous mountains of Yamagata. I'm doing a project to climb them at the moment. I've climbed 29. And Yamagata has 2,776, I think it was, mountains.
Wow.
But it depends how you define a mountain, because in English, we define it as higher than 300 meters or 1,000 feet. But there are some mountains on this list that are less than that. So I think it might be a bit of a stretch to say that there's more than 2,000, but there's a lot.
So you said you're 29 mountains into it. When do you expect to have it all wrapped up?
Right. So I was hoping to do it within 3 years, and I'm now in my third year, actually. Yes, I am. So I've still got a bit of a long way to go, but maybe within 5 years I can do it.
It's an impressive task you've set yourself. Tim, how long have you lived in Yamagata, and what brought you to Japan?
I came to Japan in 2010. I've been living in Yamagata since then. So I've been living in the Shonai region, which is where Sakata City is. And the reason why I came is I was on the JET program. I had always, since a young age, I always wanted to come and live in Japan. Just been fascinated by the culture and the language and the people, the food, the history. So I did 4 years on the JET program. Then I went back to New Zealand for about 3 months, just for family reasons. And then I came, moved back to Yamagata.
Tim, the reason we're speaking today is your practice as a Yamabushi. The term Yamabushi has come up in several episodes of the podcast so far, and I can confidently say it's going to continue to do so. So I realize it might be a bit of a tough question, but could you try to explain who are the Yamabushi and what is it they do?
This really depends on who you ask, I think, because Yamabushi were on mountains all over Japan. And so there are a whole number of different sects and different Yamabushi groups. But there's one thing that we all have in common, and that's that we practice what's called Shugendo. So it's a door. It's like Kendo or Judo. And so it's a michi, it's a path or a way. And Shugendo literally means the gen part is from the word gendiki, which actually translates to supernatural powers. And the shu part is aesthetic practice. So Shugendo is literally the path or way of gaining supernatural powers through aesthetic practice. And that's what Yamabushi practice. That's what we do.
So it's my understanding that Shugendo predates the introduction of Buddhism to Japan. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. Actually, I don't think it is correct, because Shugendo is a combination of Shintoism, then esoteric Buddhism, native Japanese animism, and Taoism, which was combined in the, I think it's the 8th century by a ascetic called En the Ascetic, or En no Gyoja. He combined these 4 different practices into one. They were all practiced separately, and then some elements blended into others. And then En no Gyoja, En the Ascetic, just decided to make it more official. It's not classified as a religion, or as far as I'm aware. That's because religions have to have their own unique doctrines. But since Shugendo combines doctrines, it doesn't have its own unique doctrines. And so it's not considered as a religion, but it does involve religious practices, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Just to clarify that a little bit further, though, and it might be another hard question to answer, how does Shugendo differ from other spiritual practices, such as Buddhism?
So Buddhism is practiced in different ways, and Shugendo is practiced normally out in the mountains. So it doesn't have to be mountains, can just be nature in general. In our case, so I'm a Shinto Yamabushi, which is that's a whole nother story. But the Shinto Yamabushi, we practice for the kami. But the Buddhists Yamabushi, so I've heard that they practice to try and get close to a bodhisattva, like one of the Buddha further on the journey towards enlightenment.
Yeah, bodhisattva being just another type of enlightened being, a type of Buddha themselves, but not the historical Buddha that we refer to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So bodhisattva are there to guide others on the way to enlightenment, and they will only ever gain enlightenment once everyone else has. And so, Yamabushi, you try and this is what I heard from a Buddhist monk, is that you try and become like the bodhisattva when you do the training.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that you're aware of these things is that you're practicing Yamabushi yourself. Tell me, how did that come to be? How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I am on the Dewa Sanzan, which is the 3 mountains of Dewa here in Yamagata, and Mount Gasan that I mentioned earlier is one of them. They're called Haguro Yamabushi. So Mount Haguro is one of the mountains here, and we practice what's called Haguro Shugendo, which is its own unique school of Shugendo. I was always interested in trying to spread the splendor of this small area of Japan, this tiny area called Shonai, it's the size of the 23 wards of Tokyo. But it's farmland, mountains, the sea, the rivers, and then a whole lot of rice fields. I was shocked. I didn't know, this place is amazing. I didn't understand why no one else knew about it. And so I'd always wanted to try and do something to try and help the area, but I didn't have anything concrete or any concrete way that I could do that. And then my friend introduced me to my now business partner Takeharu Kato, who is a Yamabushi, and he had initiated the Yamabushi Do project. He wanted to make Yamabushi training available in English, and then he heard about me and he invited me. He said, "You should become a Yamabushi," and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." It was actually that simple. So I officially became a Yamabushi in 2017. There's a week-long Yamabushi training that we do through Dewa Sanzan Jinja, Dewa Sanzan Shrine. It's called the Akinomine, the Autumn's Peak ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took part in that. And that's when I became an official Yamabushi. And when you do that training, you get an official Yamabushi name as well. And so my name is Ryo-sen, which means the spreader of the truth.
I know from reading you through your website, you have a fantastic website, by the way, just in terms
thank you.
The information that's there. Really informative, good humor to it, and just unique, for lack of a better word. The type of information that I came across there, I actually had to stop myself from reading it and intentionally try to limit the questions for today's interview. But reading through your website and also listening to some previous interviews you've done, I realize you're quite limited in what information you can provide about the training, as you're not meant as...
That's right.
Can you just give a general idea as to what's involved in terms of how long it takes, where you would go, what you would wear, these types of aspects?
For that week-long shrine training, that's like the official training to become a Yamabushi officially. That's a week on the mountains, so we're actually living in the mountains. The Yamabushi Do project is not that same training. It's a shorter version. Our flagship program is called the Masters program. That's a week long as well. So we spend 2 days in a Zen temple trying to orient people with Zen approach to acceptance, which is a big theme in Yamabushi, and also Zen as well. And so 2 days in a Zen temple, and then we have 3 days on the Dewa Sanzan Mountains directly under Master Hoshino, who is like our Yoda. He's like a really wise old man, but he's 70. He'll be 78 this year, but he's still sprightly.
I think on your website I've seen a photograph or photographs of him. He's the older gentleman with the long white beard.
That's right.
Yeah, if you were going to cast a Yamabushi for a film, you would choose exactly that person, right? But he is the real deal.
He truly is. He truly is the real deal. It's crazy when you get to meet him, and we get to train under him as well. And so we do 3 days under Master Hoshino. And then the last 2 days we spend on Mount Haguro. During those 3 days with Master Hoshino, you're not allowed to speak. There's no talking. There's no watches. There's no reading. There's no writing. Yeah, so there's no talking. So there's no questions. And so people come out like bursting with questions. And so what we did is we added an extra 2 days on Mount Haguro where you are able to ask questions. And so that completes the whole week-long experience. It's designed to help you take these lessons that you learned on the 3 days on the mountains, how we Yamabushi apply what we learn in the mountains to our daily life. And so we try to give people the opportunity to do that.
So Tim, from what I've seen of Yamabushi myself, they wear quite distinct clothing while they're participating in their training. Can you just walk us through what you're required to, well, firstly, are you required to wear it, and what you do wear while you're participating in the training? So
we wear what's called shiro shozoku, which literally translates to white clothing, white garments. We wear these white clothes. We wear a white jacket, and we have what we call them pantaloons in English. They're like baggy, extremely baggy pants, kind of like an MC Hammer. And then I don't know if this is a strictly Dewa Sanzan thing, but we wear it's called a shime. You know how in Shinto shrines you'll see like a rope which has like
the
lightning shaped.
Shimenawa.
Yeah, shimenawa. Yeah. So that symbolizes a border in between the sacred and the mundane. And so we wear a shime necklace. That's to try and protect us. For the Dewa Sanzan shrine training, we also wear these blue and white checkered, it's kind of like an overcoat with a orange belt, which is called a kaino. And we also wear what's called a tokin, which is a black hat with, I think it's 12 partitions on it. That's for the Dewa Sanzan Jinja shrine, like the official Yamabushi training. And then when we do just training under Master Hoshino, we wear on our head, it's called a hokan, which is the white, it's like a turban. It's like a white piece of cloth that we we wrap around our head, and it has these two kind of like antennae that stick out. So the mountains for Yamabushi are like we consider them to be the mother's womb, because the whole like traversing the three mountains is a journey of rebirth. And so the antennae kind of things that we have on our head are like that symbolizes the umbilical cord. So we're trying to connect ourselves to the womb of the mountain. The reason for the clothes being white is that we are symbolizing a time before we were born, or in other words, we're symbolizing, or we're trying to emulate our own death. It's all in the name of rebirth. So it's all in the name of saying goodbye to your former self and then coming back stronger than ever. The white clothes that's what they wear on the dead in Japan.
Very interesting. Yeah, so I was aware that that is a concept within Shugendo, is the concept of dying, specifically dying in the mountains spiritually, if I understand correctly, as a central kind of concept within the Yamabushi practice.
Yeah. Well, this is for the Dewasanzan Jinja. So I assume it's similar in other places in Japan. We do a ritual before we enter the mountains, which actually this symbolizes our own funeral. Interestingly, the stick that we carry, we call it a kongo zue. On the off chance a Yamabushi was to actually pass away on the mountains in real life, they would use that stick as their grave marker. So the first ritual that we do it's called the Buchushiki. Literally, it's entering the mountains ritual, and then or going into the middle of the mountain. That's to kind of say goodbye to our former selves. And then when we do the Dewasanzan Jinja, they have a whole lot of rituals which are actually simulate the moment we are conceived.
I see. Yeah, okay.
That's the moment that we receive our soul. Okay. And then we take our soul on a training in the mountain. For the Dewa-sanzan, so the three mountains of Dewa, so we've got Haguro-san, Gas-san, and Yudono-san. And Haguro-san represents the world of the present. Gas-san represents the world of the past or the afterlife. And Yudono-san represents the world of the future. And so we take our soul on these three mountains. When we return, so our soul reconnects to our body and we're believed to be reborn. That's like the concept in a nutshell.
So obviously that principle of dying spiritually is key to the practice of a Yamabushi, but you keep referring to also this training in the mountains. And I know mountain worship, not just Shugendo, but across Japanese culture actually has a real resonance. Can you speak a little bit about that as to why mountains are so important or considered to be such spiritual places?
When people die in Japan, there's a belief, it's called Kannabi Shinko. Now, I don't know how prevalent this is, but it's definitely prevalent where I am here in Yamagata. And I assume it was also common all over Japan. It was believed that, or it still is believed, that when we pass away, our souls do their own form of Yamabushi training in the mountains. First few years after we pass away, so they go to the low-lying mountains, and then after 33 years, they're led by, or they have 13 Buddha who are kind of like gatekeepers that make sure that you've achieved what needs to be achieved to be able to move on to the next level. After 33 years, our souls reach the summit of like the tallest mountain around. For us, Yamabushi, that's Mount Gasan. When our souls reach the summit, they turn into a kami. So this is why ancestor worship is so big in Japan traditionally. So the souls that are prayed to turn into kami that bring good fortune.
Mm.
But on the other hand, the souls that are not prayed to bring bad fortune.
Mm.
And so, for example, when you have like the 311, so with the big earthquake and tsunami in 2011, when whole families were wiped out, they have no one to pray for their souls because people normally pray for their own family. And we Yamabushi, we pray for the souls of the people that are lost in natural disasters so that bad fortune doesn't come for everyone. So traditionally, like mountains were believed to be the places where our souls go after we pass away. And so they're sacred locations. This is just conjecture. I have nothing to back this up. But I think like people were afraid of actually going into the mountains. Like it was like a scary place to go to, and so no one actually did go there. Some brave people called the Yamabushi, and they got untold wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, historically, I think that's right. It's my understanding. If you look at Japanese history, the Japanese places, Japanese mountains were places of inspiration, but also of fear.
Yeah,
and so the only people that would venture into them would be ascetics, like Yamabushi.
Yeah.
The people that might make their living off the forests, or people who are intentionally trying to hide because nobody else would come in there. And it wasn't until the Europeans showed up that introduced the idea of mountains as a place of recreation. Because it's also my understanding that under Shintoism, not only do our souls return to the tops of mountains upon our death, our souls are also born there.
Oh.
And they flow down the rivers, down to the human world.
Oh, so, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's that cycle, that end of the cycle by returning up there.
So I'm going to ask Master Hoshino about that. That's insightful.
Let me know if it's true, because I always say to my guests on my podcast or also on my tours that if I say something that is not correct to what you heard, I always want to know. I'm very much like, I think a person like yourself. I'm always second guessing what I'm saying, because I realize it's just what I've heard, just what I've read. It could be something else. I read on your website, or possibly one of the interviews you did, I didn't know this, that the mountains or the mandalas are considered to be projected onto the mountains.
So mandalas represent the insights that Buddha had at enlightenment. So the big tapestries that you'll see. And it's believed that these mandalas are projected onto the mountains. And so this is another reason why mountains are so important. One of the reasons why we don't talk during Yamabushi training is because the lessons aren't teachable through human, they aren't comprehensible through human minds. So we walk on the mountains, and since these mantras are projected onto the mountains, we absorb the lessons through osmosis rather than being told through other Yamabushi or having things said to us. So it's about learning through feeling, quite literally.
Yeah. So my understanding is that's consistent with Shintoism, where there isn't much scripture, and the emphasis is practice and experience over scripture. Through language and intellect, you can only get so far. Ultimate realization comes through experience. Is that
exactly?
In terms of your practice as a Yamabushi, how has it changed you as a person, and how does it affect your daily life and how you interact with others?
So this is the big question. So it's impacted everything in my life, and so the biggest example is my dad passing away when I was 27, I think, in 2016, and that was actually like a month later I met Takeharu and became a Yamabushi. And so I don't know if you want to call that coincidence or not, but so becoming Yamabushi, I learned a lot about grief, like how Japanese people grieve. And one way they do that is actually by visiting the mountains. So I've got a friend who her husband passed away. She's in her 50s, and her husband passed away, I think, about 5 years ago. And every year since, she makes an effort to climb up Mount Gassan on the anniversary of his passing, and that's just to pay respects to his soul. And so this is like a completely new world for me. Like it's quite a productive way of grieving. Like you're actually doing something about it rather than just going to the person's grave whenever you feel like it, or at least that's what my family did. Thoughts on grieving is one huge way that it changed me. The other big thing is uketomo. It's the concept or the philosophy of Haguro Yamabushi, and it means acceptance. It means I accept. And the way it works is that the Yamabushi master will give you a command. He or she will say, we are going to climb Mount Haguro. The only thing you can say is uketomo, and the only thing you can do is climb Haguro. There's that kind of literal, like following the instructions of the Yamabushi, but then there's things like, I don't know, you get stung by a bee or something, and then you have to keep climbing the mountains because that's what we call them sendatsu. That's what the sendatsu said, and so you uketomo and just climb the mountain. Yeah, uketomo it's not just a physically or literally just accepting what the master tells you. It's also more of a like accepting things that happen in your life, and because that's the first step for moving onwards.
So I think you've just answered my next question, actually. I was going to ask you more than on the personal level, because given that the practice of Yamabushi goes back well over 1,000 years now, what do you see as the role of Yamabushi and Shugendo in modern society and how they can potentially benefit individuals and communities today? But I think you've almost answered that with your previous answer.
Yeah. So one practical way is different ways of grieving. And we've actually, this year, this is just pure coincidence, but we've got two separate people coming to do that. They learned about our practice, and then they're coming, one from England, one from the US, just to go to Mount Gasan and pay their respects. So there's that kind of aspect of grief, but there's more practical aspects of just not letting things get to you too much. One other thing I love is just nature is awesome. And so whenever you feel, I don't know, a little bit down or that you want a bit of a pick-me-up, it really helps just to go out and into nature and let yourself be in the moment. And it reminds you, nature for me is a big reminder of that you're alive, that you exist, and that you're actually part of something huge, like no matter how little other people might make you feel.
In my last episode, I spoke on that theme a little, that I think in the modern world, especially as adults, it's important in life to really have things that create a sense of awe and wonder.
Yes.
And I think that in the modern world, there's very little time for that. And I think these are things that people should prioritize. And the best way to do that is to be connected to the landscape you live in and in nature.
I would say so.
Yeah. So I think we're talking.
It also reminded me a lot of when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I used to come home from school every day, and there's a forest in our backyard. I used to just go play in the forest all day. I don't know, like not really doing anything, just like playing around. But it's kind of like giving yourself permission just to do that kind of stuff, like just to be in the moment. And yeah,
well said. Now, also, Tim, I know that Shugendo and Yamabushi aren't unique to the snow country. However, they seem to kind of like it. So very nearby my home, as I mentioned to you earlier, is Togakushi, which is very famous for its Yamabushi. Do you know, is there any connection between the snow, Yamabushi, and Shugendo?
So I don't know, because when we do, for Dewa Sanzan Yamabushi, when it snows, we don't go outside. So we do komori gyo, like inside training.
I think that's answered that question.
Yeah. We do have a festival. It's called the Shoreisai on New Year's Eve. That's on snow. That's a really cool festival to watch. They have these giant mounds of straw which represent a burning demon. So they light these mounds of straw on fire, huge, about as big as a family-sized car. And then about 30 or 40 men drag it across a field when it's still alight, and then try and burn these two poles. And it's a competition to see which one burns better. That's just one part of this huge festival, which is actually the conclusion of a 100-day training.
Wow.
for two Yamabushi in the region. But
what time of year is that held?
So that's New Year's Eve. Yeah. I would highly recommend that to anyone. Yeah.
Fantastic. And on that note, Tim, actually, if listeners want to learn more, or indeed if they're interested in experiencing Yamabushi training, what services or advice do you provide?
Yeah. So we provide actual Yamabushi training. And, well, actual is kind of hard to say actual because it's not official, but we provide the same training that you would do under Deosanzan Jinja, or there's a temple that practices here as well. It's called Shozen Koganedo Temple. And so for those who are really serious, or those who really want to make a change in their life, we have Yamabushi trainings for you. And then we also do, so we've got that week-long masters that I mentioned. We have a 6-day basic training, which is it's very similar, except it's not run by Master Hoshino. It's run by other Yamabushi, and it's exclusively on Mount Haguro. And then we also have what's called the Reset program, which is 3 days of Yamabushi-based or Yamabushi-inspired activities on Mount Haguro. And that's like a huge, like that's only, we do that. It's a private thing. So we do that only for one group at a time. And then we have the winter retreat. Actually, we have a winter retreat, deep winter retreat. That's, it's kind of contradicting what I just said just earlier, but, because we're not doing it's not actual Yamabushi training that we're doing. It's like Yamabushi inspired things in the middle of winter on the Dewasanzan. So that's classic snow country.
And to participate in the trainings, do people need to be able to speak Japanese?
No. So we provide everything that you need: accommodation, transportation, food, and interpretation as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so if someone is interested, the websites they should be visiting are...
Yep. So yamabushido.jp. And if you want a little bit more information, you can see it on my website as well. My personal website is timbunting.com.
Yep. Which I mentioned, it really is a fantastic website. You have a newsletter there, which I've subscribed to, and you also have another subscription service, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
So the Substack is my subscription service now. Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah.
So if you are interested, make sure to check it out. As I mentioned, it really is a really well thought out website. Good humor, good information, and lots of surprising information there I hadn't come across on any other website yet. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. Let me wrap it up there because I realize that you haven't finished your work day yet and you do need to be elsewhere.
No worries.
So I hope you enjoyed. It's been really fantastic speaking, and hopefully we can touch base again in future and maybe have you back on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Pete.
Cheers, mate. That's it for today's episode. A very big thank you to Tim for making time to speak with me. This is one of the most rewarding chats I've had so far on the podcast that left me with even more questions. So I'll look to have Tim back on again in the future. You can follow Tim via his website, www.timbunting.com, or follow him on Instagram at Kiwi Yamabushi. Should you be interested in the training programs he discussed, please head to www.yamabushido.jp. Links to all of those are also in the show notes for today's episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, and I hope you are, and haven't already, please remember to subscribe, rate and review it. And of course, I'd love for you to help get the word out by sharing it with friends and family. My name is Peter Carnell. This has been Snow Country Stories Japan. I'll speak to you in a couple of weeks. Until then, it's bye for now.